Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Stately Office Hours. We've had a break, 1 week off, and so if we can all remember how we do this, let's see. So this is where we talk to you about what we've been working on at Stately and with XState, and we get your feedback on what we're working on and answer your questions. We have a special channel in our Discord, and I will find, there we go. If you want to join our Discord, if you're not there already, it's where we have our community, where we hang out all the time. It's discord.gg/xstate, and we have a special dedicated office hours channel in there if you want to ask questions. You can also ask questions if you're watching us on YouTube in the comments. They come straight through to us. Or if you prefer Twitter, you can use hashtag #StatelyOfficeHours. Now, why don't we start off by introducing who each of us are? I know that we do this every week, but it's just in case there's any new people who haven't met us before. So my name is Laura, and I do developer and designer relations for Stately. Matt, you're next. You go.
I'm Matt. I'm a developer for Stately, mostly working on the VS Code extension and the visual editor.
And Anderist, who are you?
I'm a junior developer at Stately, working on the visual editor for XState and trying to tame Cypress wizardry to make those interactions stellar. And
when he says junior, he is joking, because obviously he is a far superior developer to many of us.
Only junior to God, I think.
Yeah. And last but not least, David.
Hey, I'm David. I'm the founder of Stately, creator of XState, and eventually we will be looking for some actual junior developers. So let us know if you're interested next year.
He quickly says next year before we get flooded. Yeah, it would be cool. Come work with us. We are not in the same room, but we have a good situation online.
Mm-hmm.
And so this week we got quite a lot to talk about because we haven't had a catch up for a couple of weeks, but we thought we would start off talking about the GitHub bot. Now, I have no idea what the GitHub bot is, and so that forced Matt to explain what he's been doing because I've completely missed out on this. Oh, Matt, you're muted.
No! Okay, I'm back. Right. So this is something that that has been a really big requested feature for a long time. And I had some time on Monday and I thought, okay, let's just see what we need to get here. The feature, the thing that people have been asking for is when they make a PR, what they want to do, it's actually if I just remove my face for a second, is when you make a change on, let's say, a state machine in a GitHub repo, what people have really been asking for a long time is that, you could get like a comment that was auto attached to the PR that had a new visualization of the new state machine, which would be like, okay, so I changed this and this and this and this, and without you even having to do anything, it would just automatically comment it and add it. Well, we now live in a reality where that's one step closer, because I've got a little demo here, which is this little webhook demo repo here. This isn't public, by the way, so you can't come and look at this. And as you'll see here, Stately GitHub bot has commented, and it's added a machine which is the same as you would get inside your VS Code extension if you're using that. And it's just attached it to the line where the machine is. So if we look at this demo.tsx file, as you can see, there's a machine here, view-only page machine, which sort of looks like this, blah, 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 blah. This is a comment on like any other, or like any other that you can comment on and blah, 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 blah. And it does this for any machine that's changed in the course of the PR. So this is the kind of exciting future that we're living in now. We get to actually have, this is one of the real benefits of using state machines in your code, or at least one of the promised benefits, is that all of the tooling is visual around it. So you can really see what has changed in your app, and anyone looking at this can understand the code and understand its intent. And it's kind of like auto-commenting on the PR for you, auto-explaining what has changed, and auto-documenting, which I think we find particularly exciting. Anderist, I know that this is something that's been in your kind of set of dreams for a long time. This is like something you've been wanting for a long time. Yeah, a big thumbs up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just going to be, it's so exciting. Like, I think I saw a comment on Twitter when I posted this, which is someone saying, along with this and something called replay, which is a way of kind of reporting bugs in an incredibly, that's to do a deep injustice, but it allows you to replay events in the browser essentially exactly as they happened. And having both this and replay coming at the same time, it feels like a renaissance for dev tools. Like, it's so exciting, and reviewing PRs is going to be so much easier.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I can't believe I've managed to miss that this week. That is a game changer of a feature. Very nice. When will people be able to start using it?
Well, it depends on how much priority we want to put on shipping it. There's still some bugs with it. It's still not quite working. Eric has been, Eric in the comments has been playing around with it for me, and he's been using it with some success, I think. But I think there's just some deploy issues at the moment that we're getting over. So it should be ready for release probably. So you can look forward to it then.
Eric says, ask Andorist about replay.
I mean, if we ask Andorist about replay, he's never going to stop talking. But yeah, why don't you give them a...
that could have been a very long meeting, so let's maybe just keep over that this time.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Andorist has been using it endless amounts, and Jason Laster has been talking to us a lot as well. We've been quite involved, and it's an amazing, amazing product. It's called replay.io is the website for it if you want to look at it.
Very cool. Now, we just saw coming up on your screen a little teaser as to what we were going to be talking about next, courtesy of GitHub notifications, because one for multitasking, Farzad just deployed our new blog. And so I'm just going to bring up a window so I can share it with you. So bear with me a second as I navigate my many, many browser windows that I've got going on.
Farzad, since you missed the intros, why don't you introduce yourself?
That's a good idea.
I'm still the same person.
Oh no!
But what about people? People might not have been here last week, so
True,
the week before last.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad to say that my name is still Farzad, and I'm still working at XState, unless David says otherwise. But yeah, I'm an engineer in Stately, and we've been focusing on deploying and getting the blog out for the past 2 weeks with Laura.
Yeah, and so here you can see our new blog, which you can reach, if I get the banner out, at stately.ai/blog. And Farzad, why don't you tell everyone how we made it, what we made it out of?
Sure. So the technology that we use for implementing the blog is Next.js and TypeScript. And we're using Markdown and MDX to be able to embed any sort of React components into the blog posts. I think that this is basically a very straightforward technology to write blogs these days. But one thing that we've been dealing with and struggling with was getting the RSS feed out of the MDX content for the blog. That we managed to do that thanks to the help of Andorist. Yeah, so we also have the links to the RSS if you're keen to subscribe to our content. We don't have the links here, but they are under /feeds and /feed.xml, feed.json, and feed.atom, if I'm saying that correctly.
See how well Chrome copes with an RSS feed. Oh, feeds.
Okay, so we might have some difficulties right now because after deploying to prod, we have some surprises because of the rewrites that we have in the production. But we'll get that working. We already have the feed working locally, so we'll get there. Anything else? Well, we have some custom components for being able to embed Twitter and YouTube, or we have also a custom component that uses the embedded mode of the visualizer so that we can use our own visualizer into the blog posts. And I realized that some of the posts that David wrote before are using the screenshots from the old visualizer, so we might get to update them as well. We could do that about the docs if you haven't already done that. And something really neat that Laura did was to copy over everything that Matt and David has already written on dev.to, and we already have the entire content out there in the blog. And we agreed on that we have this concept of research on Mondays, and we thought that it would be cool if somebody's working on something neat and we wanted talk about it, we could write a blog post about it every Monday. We could make a habit out of it. Yeah. And also David is going to write the first post.
Yeah. We're making him promise.
Or the first newest post.
Yes, the first new. You also wrote the first ever post as well. There we go. 2019.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's vintage. That's good.
Yeah.
That's like classic angry you state, David.
Yeah.
And if anyone actually wants us to write a blog post about anything particular, if there's any question that you wanted answering or examples that you want us to share, we'd be happy to write some blog posts for you. If you could give us some inspiration, that'd be really great. We'll be planning things to share on there. We've got lots of ideas, but if there's anything specific that you're after, we will be happy to try to accommodate you. And this is actually, the design is a bit of a sneak peek as to what's coming up for Stately, because we've got a new landing page design in the works. And basically a lot of the design that I implemented for the blog is borrowed from there to try and use the styles from there so that we get a nice feel across everything. So if you like dark mode, you'll be really into it.
The Stately environment is like the Dark Knight. But one other thing, somebody asked me on Twitter a few days ago that whether we're going to accept the guest posts later on. This is something that we might think about later, but we don't probably have it right now.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about right now, but it's a good idea. I like the idea of it. We get some good posts. And of course, if you do write anything about XState, please let us know, because we'd love to share it with everyone who's following us too. Like, we love good XState content. It doesn't have to be written by us. And so next, we asked earlier in the week, what are the opportunities and challenges for using XState on the back end? So if you're on our Discord, you might have noticed that we do actually have a channel for discussing, or at least help on the back end. And we've had more and more people coming in and wanting to know about using XState on the back end. So we thought we would discuss it. And we got some really good tweets and feedback on this week. And now you have to bear with me a little bit here, because whilst I'm a developer, I'm very much on the front end of things, and back end is quite complicated for me. So I hope that I read things correctly and that I make sense here. I'm actually going to start off because Cedric, who is a pal of ours, who is often turns up for our office hours, is here again. And he actually asked a really good question on our Discord. So I'm going to find it because I think it's a nice one to start off with. And I'm hoping that the rest of you will be able to answer this. So Cedric asks, I have never used XState in backend, but I'm really interested about it. What's the best way to use it if your backend is in .NET or some other different language from your front end, and your front end might be in JavaScript? How could you share the machines easily between the back and the front ends? For example, I use the open API spec shared by Swagger from the backend to expose the model endpoint and generate the front end model and API. Is something similar could be done with that?
So yeah, I'll take this one. So it's part of our future plans to make XState obviously not just JavaScript and TypeScript specific, but rather something that can be shared with multiple different languages. And so that means, writing an interpreter for each language. But I know that people have experimented with basically taking that JSON definition and, just writing a small interpreter for it, even without having the full XState spec, like maybe they're just using the finite states without hierarchical states. And then it's pretty easy to write an interpreter for that. But I would say that the first step to do, like just before that all even exists, and this was also mentioned in Twitter too, is using something called CQRS. And so CQRS stands for Command and Query Responsibility Segregation, and it's a pattern where you describe things in terms of events, like what happened or what needs to be done, such as book a flight instead of, change flight status to booked or whatever. So you have that, and then you separate it from the query. And so that architecture lends itself really nicely to eventually refactoring into a state machine or a states chart in the future. So I think a lot of the opportunities we see for using XState in the backend is, number one, having it supported in all of these languages, and number two, having it express the workflow logic that you would see in lots of backend applications. In fact, I would say most backend applications can use a state machine. And well, what's interesting too is that a lot of people ask, like, yeah, XState seems cool, but I'm not sure what to use it for. When you get into backend land, there are so many more examples than front end land, it seems.
To extend this question out a little bit more, XState is really interesting for imagine if I'm going to take the question as sort of how do I use it with JavaScript and TypeScript, really, because XState is primarily a JavaScript TypeScript library at the moment. And so if you want to use XState in the backend now, it's really, currently it's very, very good for modeling really complex interactions in the backend and modeling single processes that are really complex. So imagine if you have a server and one of the people in our Discord, Rob Penner, he said that this blew my mind. One of the first times he ever used XState was for syncing up a Steinway piano to some server or something, which would like automatically play the piano. And it's incredible how XState can sort of sit in the middle. And when it's a long running process, when it's like a single node server, and it sits there and it goes do, 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 then XState can manage that process brilliantly. If it's connecting via WebSockets, then it's amazing. The thing that XState currently isn't so good at right now is short running processes, processes like lambdas. And if you imagine that you have a lot of the way that sort of backend works now is serverless. And what that generally means is you have one async function that sort of does the whole thing. So you start with some input and then you wait a little bit and then you return some output. So XState doesn't at the moment have a first class way to basically represent that. XState is really good at saying like, okay, we can represent a long running process that will last an indefinite amount of time, such as a UI, for instance. So a UI can sit on the screen for as long as the user has the browser open, right? It's a long running process. Whereas short running processes, XState isn't so good at. And I'm really intrigued by this question because I think XState can be incredibly good at it. It's just we don't have quite the tools yet. There's no what we really need is we need to be able to take a machine and turn it into a promise. So you need to say, okay, await machine.run blah, 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 and then it returns some output. When we can do that, then I think it will be a lot more obvious how to use XState in the backend. But of course, there are difficulties with that as well.
Cool. We have also had some ideas coming from Twitter. So I'm going to just share my screen, making sure I share the right screen. And that way I will be able to show you the tweets as I read them so that you're not just having to listen to me. All right, here we go. Twitter. Let me make that window a little bit bigger for you. How well does Twitter stand up to Zoom? We shall see. So Jan Lafleur says, because after doing some research and as much as I like JS, it is definitely not an efficient language to handle state machines on the back end. I want to be able to model my entities using state machines across calls, which requires, as David said, CQRS, EE. I'm not sure what EE is. Someone maybe enlighten me. Doable, but Elixir is better for it. So what is Elixir and how would it compare? Do any of you know?
Send this over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking up EE because I think that's a Java framework or something. I thought that E was something to do with event sourcing, but the letters don't exactly match up. It's ES, not EE. Anyway, yeah, so it is definitely apparent that other languages are better suited for this. But yeah, that's not the main point. Like the main point is that, the idea of using state machines and state charts in the back end is definitely interesting. And so just like Jan said, being able to model entities using state machines, and again, using that CQRS pattern, that's going to be really useful.
there's something here about, there's a difference between modeling a process, like modeling a promise with a state machine, and modeling an entity with a state machine. Let's imagine that you have like an entity which is like a user. The user is in the, I don't know, let's say they're in the normal state, for instance, and then you send that user entity an event, which would be like make admin, and then that user entity in the database changes state and goes into the admin state. Then you can have like the banned state or whatever. That's really fascinating, because imagine if you wanted to, whenever the user changed from a normal state to the admin state, you want to send an email. Well, what you could do is you would have a state in between, which would be like the sending email state. And all you need to do in order to change, like to represent the entire business logic of a user in your system, is a single state chart. That's really fascinating. It's a slightly different use case from what we were talking about from the process point of view. You're not representing the entire process, but kind of many journeys that your entity can take. Yeah, really, really intriguing idea.
Yeah. One obvious application of this is just for databases, like you said, whether it's like the status of a user and their status throughout a process. And so this is an important distinction too between like things that are short-lived and long-lived. So you could have like, for example, a subscription state chart can be a state chart that represents years, because obviously you might want someone to be subscribed for years, and you might have logic that says every month send them an invoice or something for their subscription. But obviously you don't want to async await a years long call. Like that's really impractical, but you do want some sort of mechanism, like you were saying before, to say, maybe I just want to query the status, or maybe I want to wait for a certain condition to be true. And those are short-lived. So we do need utilities to say, I want to await this state machine until this condition is true, or maybe something that says I want to await until the state machine is finished, for if the entire state machine is short.
Yeah, you can, what we're talking about, both of these things, like the entity way of doing it or the process way of doing it, you can do that today. It's just that it's sort of, there are some weird risks associated with it. It's not like given first class support. We don't have like an XState node package, for instance, for using this stuff. Yeah, like Eric is saying, set timeout, renew subscription 1 year. Like this is something that you could think about doing in the future.
Yeah. So something that actually blew my mind was, if you're not familiar with it, it's called temporal.io. And so Temporal is basically the infrastructure backend layer of like workflows. And it's, some of my friends work there. It's a really, really interesting project. And so with Temporal, what's amazing is that you could actually express like set timeout 1 year or something like that. And so it's just going to continue to work. But you write it in a way where it's like, it feels imperative, but it's really just doing the whole CQRS and like just those granular calls in the back end. So yeah, someone actually did a project, and I have it here. It's the Temporal Electronic Signature by Devessier, French guy. He actually did a really good demonstration at the last Temporal meetup. I really recommend you check it out. It shows how XState and Temporal works together. And there's some obvious opportunities that he manually had to do a bunch of things, like for delayed transitions and for querying the machine state and making sure that that's preserved. Yeah, we could definitely put that into core and make that a first-class citizen rather than you having to wire that up yourself. So definitely check out this project for videos.
I'll try and find a link to that talk and add it into the description that we have for the video on YouTube after we finish being live. So we had some more thoughts on this. Let me get there we go, back up. And I think this is going along with kind of what you were just saying, that Charles Pick says, I've been working on this, as in using XState on the back end, for the last 12 months in one form or another. There's a bunch of different ways to approach it. It's pretty easy to use XState directly when modeling, e.g. a password reset or login logic. but I want to make everything in our database a state chart. One challenge with this is that async is much more prevalent on the back end, and the regular XState way of dealing with async actions via explicit modeling is too cumbersome to provide a good developer experience if you're doing it everywhere. I work around this by having an async action type that I handle in a sort of meta state chart interpreter. This interpreter is responsible for loading the appropriate machine definition and current context from the database, then queues events so they can be sent sequentially. Because I'm handling the event queuing and the interpretation outside of the normal XState interpreter, I can safely wait for an async action to complete without having to worry about concurrent events. When the transition completes, I write the updated state to the database. We're productionizing this at the moment. It's been a journey to get to this point, but overall, I'm really happy with how it's turning out. Being able to use the XState visualizer on machines in a live database is really very cool. One challenge I've had with this is providing an API that doesn't feel dissimilar from normal XState. We're onboarding people onto XState in the front end, so I want to make sure that they can also use those skills in the back end without too much difficulty. Now we're coming up to a code example, so I can't read a code example out loud. I'm not that skilled. But anyone have any thoughts on this from Charles?
First of all,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I just want to say Charles is a criminally underfollowed person on Twitter, and he's super insightful on a lot of state machine things. So if you're really interested in that sort of thing, then follow him. This is really intriguing, and it's kind of what I was describing in terms of the difficulties that you have to go through working around XState to put it on the back end, basically. But everything he's describing here sounds really interesting. What do you think, David?
Yeah, so the one thing that I'm like just super focused on right now is that async action thing. So typically the way that you would do this in XState is to have invocation. So you would have a state where you invoke some sort of promise or something. And that comes with benefits too, because you could interrupt that. You could have custom logic for timeouts. You could even invoke multiple things at the same time. And you could do something, when that thing is done, like you could grab that data, assign it to context, do whatever you want. But I do understand that this sort of deviates from the, I guess you could call it the idiomatic way of using async await in projects. But so here's the thing, async await is an implicit state machine. In fact, like the way that it is modeled in pretty much any programming language is as a state machine. As a fun thought experiment, you could even go to Babel and sort of just see what it decompiles to. It's like a big generator function or something like that, or the equivalent of that. But yeah, so this does give me ideas for like, how do we make it friendlier and easier for developers to express, like, if they're thinking in their mind, I would just await this and then do this, and then maybe await that and then do that. How do we make that easier to do in XState itself without sacrificing the whole state machine and state chart concepts that are inherent to XState? So interesting challenge, and I'd love to see more code just to see what opportunities we have to improve the API.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have people that come up with all these clever ways of doing things as well. It really helps. Now, if I keep going down, we haven't got loads more, just so I won't be reading to you forever. Florian, who I think is, I saw in the comments, saying, again, I imagine that the main challenge will be to be able to await that the state machine has ended, because backend is mostly a cold process. So the challenge would be to correctly wrap the machine in a promise and resolve or reject when the given final state has been reached. So that's kind of what you were just talking about there.
Exactly.
And just to, yes, I forgot. I was going to say we've got one more left. We've actually got two. It's Judical, had to look up how to pronounce that one. Says, like the authentication, that would be useful there. I can imagine how it could be very useful for authentication, that's for sure. And Eric, and I know you're in the comments, Eric. So Eric actually replied saying, yeah, using XState in the backend is glorious. And while he's still working on this machine today, it's easy to follow the flow. And we have then a fantastic thread from Eric talking about how he modeled his backend interaction, full of business logic. So I think if anyone wants to find that, you can find it via our original tweet. Maybe we'll retweet this later rather than have me reading it all out. But it's good to know people are already using it.
In a more sort of general sense, it's such a fascinating application for XState because if we expand the definition of backend to basically mean anything that isn't front end, then like all sorts of applications come to mind. Then it could be, for instance, a lot of sort of crypto rubbish is happening at the moment with
smart contracts, things like that.
Yeah, smart contracts and things where if you deploy it somewhere, you can't ever undeploy it. You know, so you want to make sure that your product is of incredibly high quality when you do put it out there, if that's something you're interested in doing. Or similar applications such as like payment systems or, you know, authentication systems, you know, anything where things are really, really on the line, you know, and it has to work. You can do the traditional stuff, which is kind of unit testing and that sort of thing, or you can do, or you can add to that by visually modeling everything in your application and visually modeling everything on your backend. So if we get this right, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, two other really interesting use cases I've seen people actually use XState for, chatbots and home automation projects, which is really cool. In fact, there's a Node-RED plugin for XState where you could, you know, use that as a state machine. So the fact of the matter is people are already using XState for things way beyond just front-end stuff. And they have been for many years. And so that's why I think now's the prime time to give it first-class attention. And especially with the upcoming visual editor, just being like, imagine being able to create your workflows or your home automation projects or even your chatbots directly in this editor.
Yep, be huge.
Yeah.
Imagine, and even just to append onto the chatbots, like an Alexa app, you know, something that essentially has a front end, but you don't see the front end. You communicate with the front end. That's an XState application right there, except it runs on Lambdas, you know, so you'd have to, we have to solve certain problems before we get there. There we go, Matthew Phillips. creator of Lucy, probably Matt Phillips. Yeah, I imagine that's him. Can't see his photo there.
Is it the Matthew Phillips?
Oh, could be. So excited. Yeah, but that's the idea.
Oh, so many cool things. And so I don't know if anyone has any questions this week. You know that you can ask us in our Office Hours channel on Discord. You can ask us on Twitter using the hashtag #StatelyOfficeHours, or just here in the YouTube comments as well. If you are here on YouTube, you might be watching us on Twitter. You can do that now. So if anyone does have any questions, just let us know and we'll try and get them in before we stop. Anybody else on the team got anything you wanted to share this week? We've covered a lot.
I wonder if we could give an update on the visual editor, David.
Yeah, we could talk about it. So we, like you all may know, we have let in a handful of people into the closed editor beta. We've been getting a bunch of good feedback and always welcoming more. So that's why in the coming weeks, we are going to be adding a few more people into it, and then a lot more people in January, because we're hoping, and you're only hearing this on the stream here, we're hoping to have an open beta by the end of January, early February, you know, for more people. We're adding a ton of features. We even have a bunch behind feature flags. For example, Matt is working on choice nodes. So if you could imagine all of your flowcharty type stuff that you would typically do in a, you know, other design tool, like you could pretty easily do it here now, or at least you will be able to soon. And yeah, just we have so many cool features planned.
The one I'm most excited about is being able to edit XState charts in a visual way. That's going to be just nuts.
Oh yeah. So that's something that, you know, I'm working on. And so what I'm working on is actually going to be applicable to the visualizer too. And that's having a better graph layout for, let's say you just have XState code and you want to lay that out in the visualizer or the editor, just having an automatic way to do it in a nice way so that you could then manually position things wherever you want. At least in the editor, that's not going to be part of the visualizer, but yeah.
Sindra has a question. What's the best resources to get the right mental model to understand how to model correctly with XState? I think this is a question that we get quite a lot because it is something you have to get your head around. I'm still getting my head around it to some degree. I would say that actually, if you watch some of our previous office hours, I'll try and find the links to them. was it the last one that we had where we had a fantastic walkthrough with Matt showing us how to do some modeling. So I think that would be a good place to start. I think you've done quite a few videos with examples of modeling in as well, haven't you, Matt?
Yes, I'm a male model. That's what I do.
That got me.
Oh, great, right. So unbelievable.
No, it's just a good pun.
Well, Farzad, this is a good question for you, right? You've probably been combing quite a lot of resources to come up with blog articles and that sort of thing.
Could you ask it again?
Well, in making the engineering blog, you've probably been looking through all mine and David's old blogs.
Yeah,
and
actually, I was thinking about two of the posts that you published already. One is whether should it be an invocation or an action, something like that. You have a post about that. We can send a link to that, later on. And another one was how you love the invoke callbacks. Those two are actually very helpful if you want to get your head around the mental model of modeling with the state charts. Because usually we have different, we have a lot of primitives in the state chart world, and you just can't get your head around, when to use what. And well, I went through the same process, and I think these two posts will be really helpful for everybody.
Yeah, like anything, you eventually sort of pick your favorites and you work out what you're comfortable using, and you start to piece them together. It's like a puzzle, really, and it's like a Lego set, basically. You can build anything, and you can build it out of lots of different pieces.
Yeah.
And just another reminder, I have the front-end masters workshop that I just gave. I think they're still working on editing the videos, but on this one, I really emphasized the modeling part, like how to think about, like, okay, I have this thing I need to build. Here's all the things that could happen. Here's all the requirements. How do I actually piece them together and then apply it to a state machine, instead of just being like, here's the XState API, here's some examples for it. Like, I feel like learning it from a modeling perspective is more useful, and that's what the workshop describes.
And of course, in the future, we'll be writing more about these things and giving you introductions in the documentation. That is absolutely planned.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone else doesn't have anything else they want to share, we can wrap this up for the week. Yeah, we're good?
All good.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us again, and you will be able to find us here, same place, same time again next week. It was lovely speaking to you. See you later.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle.